So good afternoon, everybody from Hayama, Japan. My name is Eric Zussman, and I am a research director at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies in Hayama, Japan. It's a pleasure to be here today to help introduce and moderate this session on promoting synergistic approaches in Asia and the Pacific, addressing the triple planetary crisis. Today's session is increasingly timely, as it will offer a big opportunity to discuss the ways that countries and cities can take this important concept of synergies and reflect it in their policies and actions. In that context, what I'd like to do now is bring us to the opening of the session, where we will have some address from the Embassy of Japan in Thailand. So in that connection, I would like to ask our colleagues to please run the opening remarks from Nishioka-san at the Embassy in Thailand. Thank you very much.
Distinguished colleagues, a very warm welcome to each and every one of you gathered here today for the APFSD side event focused on promoting synergistic approaches in Asia and the Pacific, addressing the triple planetary crisis. It is my honor to deliver opening remarks to this event. We are currently facing the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Given the enormity of the tasks, measures to address all these environmental needs and challenges in a synergistic fashion is attracting attention worldwide. Science, environmental practice, and economic information are indicating that the integration of environmental actions towards addressing common drivers of degradation is a necessary condition to restoring the health of the environment and ensuring equitable and prosperous sustainable development. Japan has been early in recognizing the need to promote large, integrated, and impactful programs across several sectors to address multiple drivers of environmental changes simultaneously. We have found that addressing the drivers of environmental degradation using an integrated framework result in more impact per unit of investment than comparable investments, as well as create the conditions for transitions towards lasting systems transformation. We have repeatedly expressed support for such programs through our large contributing presence in the World Bank's Global Environment Facility and highlighted the importance of such synergies in the communiques of the G7 ministerial meeting on climate, energy, and environment in Sapporo, as well as the latest Hiroshima summit under Japan's presidency last year. To accelerate such effort further, Japan is set to propose a resolution entitled Promoting Synergistic Approaches to Address the Triple Crisis of Climate Change, Biodiversity Loss, and Pollution, and Support Sustainable Development, at the upcoming 6th United Nations Environment Assembly in Nairobi at the end of this month. Through this resolution, we call on countries to accelerate their effort to achieve the SDGs by taking an integrated approach, identifying specific policy measures to enhance synergies among climate, biodiversity, pollution, combating measures, based on the latest scientific knowledge and tangible evidence to inform our future actions. The latest ESCAP report on SDGs, Progress in Asia-Pacific, issues a warning that on its current trajectory, the region will not meet any of the 17 SDGs by 2030. Furthermore, it warns that the year of achieving SDGs in this region is estimated to be 2062 onwards. The report also shows that Goal 13, climate action, has continued to regress. Clearly, our region remains both a victim and a major driver of climate change, and urgent action is thus needed. We would like to continue working with like-minded partners in the Asia-Pacific region and worldwide to promote this efficient approach in the run-up to the Summit of Future this September. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Nishioka-san from the Thailand Embassy, the Japanese Embassy in Thailand, rather. This was very helpful for setting the context for our discussion today, particularly emphasizing some of the progress and lack of progress on the SDGs according to the SCAP report, and also highlighting Japan's effort through UNEA resolution to promote synergies as a way to accelerate progress. I think this gives us a really nice context to talk a little bit greater detail about how some of the science is moving into some of the action on synergies. And I think in that connection, I'd like to then turn it over to our esteemed colleague, Dr. Heidi Hackman, who is the Director of Future Africa and a strategic advisor on transdisciplinarity and global knowledge networks at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And Heidi is also one of the key authors of a new report on synergies and helping to spearhead this effort at a global level. So with that, Heidi, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you to you and the organizers for giving me this time to just give you a very short overview of the report that was launched in September last year on this important issue of harnessing climate and SDG synergies. Eric, I assume the slides will be shared, so I'm going to go through them rather quickly in the interests of time. So next slide, please. Thank you. So colleagues, the idea here was to convene an international panel of experts, 14 experts from different thematic and geographic backgrounds who were asked to put together what is essentially the first global report on this issue of synergistic action. Next slide, please. So essentially, you know, if we think about it, since the launch of the SDG framework, there's been a lot of work, a lot of scientific work, but a lot of policy discussion as well about the indivisible nature of the framework, about interactions between the various goals. And so the issue of synergies and trade-offs certainly isn't new to either the scientific, or the policy, or the practitioner community. But what was recognized in the call for this report was that you know, there are certain challenges that remain. First of all, there is no consolidated collection of the evidence. There is an absence of easy access or reference to the various tools for acting on synergistic ambitions, practical guidelines for policymakers. There clearly is an issue of finance and the need for reform of financial and enabling financial mechanisms for this type of work. And then also, finally, you know, if we think synergies are so important, then what about the adequacy or inadequacy of our current reporting mechanisms? How can we further incentivize and enable the implementation and reporting and monitoring of synergistic action? So that, broadly speaking, was some of the sort of problems and challenges that the report was supposed to address. And it's important to say that, as I've said, there's been long debate about this issue. There's been lots of work, And as you well know, there have been several global conferences. So we were trying to draw all of these bits and pieces together. In addition, and if we could move to the next slide, we wanted to look at some of the existing barriers and possibly other barriers, and begin to give a sense of how these might be addressed. Some of the key barriers that have been identified in previous work, and that certainly came out of this report as well, is the access to knowledge. Here, a really important element is the disconnect, or the failure, if you will, between at that science policy practice interface. That's something that we've been grappling with for a long time, but also, as I said, an easily accessible, coherent collection of the evidence and associated methodologies and tools. So that knowledge access, that it's not a knowledge gap, but it's a knowledge access, is one of the barriers we had identified. The adequate financial mechanisms, very important, appropriate financial mechanisms, and then, of course, a very big barrier and something that's rather complex in its own right is the political processes of coherence, coordination, as well as underlying motivation to act on synergistic action is one of the barriers. And in association with that also, you know, the idea of the collaboration between government and other actors from civil society, from industry, from the scientific community, of course. So some key challenges and some barriers that kind of set the scene for this report. Next slide, please. So the key message is not a surprise to anyone, but really, having gathered the evidence, we can now say without hesitation that synergistic action, the tackling of the climate agenda and the sustainable development goals in concert certainly provides us with a possible course correction. This is the language of the Secretary General of the UN, who has recently talked about synergistic action as a course correction, given the situation we are in, given the urgency of making progress, given, as our distinguished introductory speaker so beautifully outlined, the current crises that we are in. So next slide is simply to indicate that, you know, as we always do, that the clock is ticking. We are facing an urgent situation. There is a need for increased ambition levels on both the Paris Agreement and the SDG. And the report's key message is that synergistic action, if we get it right, if we understand also its contextual power, then we are able to perhaps foster progress in line with the transformative needs that we all emphasize at the moment. Next slide, please. So what the report does, and I obviously don't have time to go into this in any detail, but I do hope that this report or first of all, that this brief introduction can encourage you to go and use the report. It provides a wealth of evidence from all over the world and makes a compelling case for the gains to be won based on that evidence. In addition, it provides instructive best practice examples of how synergistic action can be planned, monitored, implemented. And as I've indicated, it addresses some of those big barriers to this type of action, but also provides new knowledge, new insights based on some of the expert interviews that were done for the report. Next slide. Apart from the fact that this might be one of our course correction, opportunities, that we can get things right, that we can actually book progress on both climate and SDG agendas, one of the big opportunities here is also the financial implications, the cost effectiveness of acting in synergy, planning in synergy. So that is also an important message from the report. Next slide, please. I think we've addressed this, reducing financial gaps, achieving targets faster, facilitating long-term vision. And I think importantly, and the report goes into some detail in this, is that, you know, when obviously planning synergistic action is in itself a complex task, and there are certain principles that need to be taken into account when this is done. The key one is about justice and equity. And the other one I would say that's not reflected on this slide, and that was again referred to in our opening speaker's remarks, is that, you know, synergistic actions can book progress, but at some point we also now urgently need to look at action that can help inform and support profound systems change to the institutions, the practices, and the policies that sustain our current unsustainable lifestyles. So transformation, becoming serious about processes of social transformation, is also a principle that we need to begin to explore in conjunction with the idea of synergistic action. Next slide, please. There is a lot in the report about context. And here I simply want to say that I think the value of the kind of meeting and the discussions you are going to have in this event is so important, because we know context matters, place matters. It also raises really interesting questions about progress, linking progress at the local level and what that means for global progress. And we can't assume that this is simply an accumulative, summative process, that we really need to look at how action planned in one context may have spillover, negative spillover consequences for situations in another context. So the context is primary, and we need to, and I'll get back to this, we need to become much more concrete in how we advise on dealing with the complexities of context. And I'm sure that, Eric, you and your colleagues, based on discussions like in this event, will be able to contribute hugely to that important element of the report. So let's look very briefly then, if you could skip 2 slides for me. We're all into integrated action, but the 10 recommendations that were made. So the first one is not really about synergistic action, but it recognizes how the lack of resilience, collective resilience, in the face of body crises that the world faces, that is a kind of fundamental, foundational issue for progress on all our sustainable development and climate ambitions. So that is a foundational recommendation, and that needs a report on its own. Then more to the point, strengthening the science policy, society or practice interface. That's a key recommendation, promoting institutional capacity for cross-sectoral and international, but as well national, coherent national coordination and collaboration. This notion of ensuring policy coherence really forces us to look at the policy approaches at national level. Developing a framework for action, I'll talk more about that in a moment, and using that to ensure not only a just, but a transformative transition. To address the various investment gaps, look at the financial mechanisms involved there. There was a recommendation about utilizing COP28 in Dubai, which is now behind us. But linked to that, there's, you know, it's important to recognize that The UN colleagues, the UN agencies that commissioned this report, UNFCCC, UNDESA, they are really committed to prioritizing the work on taking synergistic action forward in all its complexity. And then the final recommendation was to say, let's look at cities as a major site of practice, learning, monitoring, and experimentation with synergistic action. So those are 10 recommendations. So what comes next? This is all still fairly abstract. And if we move to the next slide, I think based on what you must remember is that this report was done in a matter of a few months. So it was very, very intense work, wealth of evidence gathered. But again, you know, a big report is not that accessible necessarily to the policymakers who are responsible for coming up with VNRs and NDCs and having to plan and respond to the recommendations made. So we have been asked with the same panel, and we will include a broader set of experts, we have been asked also in preparation for the Summit for the Future in September this year to take the next step. And the next step really is to become much more concrete. It's not to do further analysis. It's starting to look at what can we do practically to assist in enabling and advancing synergistic action from local, national to global levels. So we've got 4 sub-working groups now that will be reporting, I think, at the end of March. The one is looking at the need for a global knowledge and data platform. So where that evidence that we've gathered and beyond can be made accessible and easily accessible so that somebody doesn't have to read a report, but that there is an online resource. The second subgroup, which is the one that I'm involved in, is looking at this notion of what advice can we give to the policymakers? That would be our first target audience, to assist them in understanding what tools are available, what are the essential process questions that have to be asked, what are some of the key principles associated with planning synergistic action, and how do those translate into practical pathways? What sorts of political approaches, this issue of coherence, what does that mean on the ground? So a very practical and concrete and easily accessible and clear framework for action, for transformative action. There's a subgroup working on, again, very concrete recommendations about a new financial system that is appropriate to support. And then there's a cross-cutting deep dive theme on looking at this issue of access to information, framework for action for policymakers, financial implications, but with cities as the focal. What does all of that mean if we act in terms of urban policy and planning? So that is what is coming up. That's what we are working on at the moment. Suffice it to say, we hope that this will be useful. It is very, very deeply encouraging to hear about Japan's strong support, the programs and the actions that are being planned that were mentioned in the opening speech. And I can only hope that the work that this expert panel is doing, also in close collaboration with Eric and colleagues, may be of some value and concrete support to countries like Japan and many others around the world. Eric, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Heidi, for those very not only encouraging, but also illustrative presentation of what's happening in the synergy space. I think this program for action and the way that we take some of the conclusions that you and the other experts have generated and translate them into tangible progress on the ground is going to be critically important. And I think that's the direction we're also going with this side event. So in that connection, I would like to now bring the virtual podium over to our colleague, His Excellency Aminatav Yavuli. He is the Ambassador Extraordinaire and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Fiji to the Republic of Indonesia, the High Commissioner to Singapore, the High Commissioner to Malaysia, and the Permanent Representative to UN SCAP in Bangkok. And he will be speaking a little bit about the application of synergies for Fiji as a small island developing state. His Excellency Amina, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. I hope you guys can hear me well.
We can hear you fine. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate on this virtual side event. First of all protocols observed. Selamat siang from Jakarta. Let me thank the government of Japan and associated institutes for hosting this virtual side event in the lead up to the 11th APFSD and promoting synergies and linkages between climate change and other SDGs. Next page, please. In brief, I think it's important to contextualize the situation that we are in. And I entirely agree with Heidi that contextualization or context really matters. As you know, that we are a group of islands, small island states, with limited land mass. We are a tropical maritime country with a population of less than 1 million, and the GDP growth struggling at the moment post-COVID. With about $4,000 GDP per capita. We are a middle-income country. And I'm contextualizing this, and I'm glad that Heidi has mentioned it, that the challenges that we do face as small island states, despite our efforts to and opportunities to bring synergies across, we're still facing enormous challenges. Next page, please. The key challenges and opportunities of Fiji as a small island developing state, you will note that we are among the nations least responsible for climate change, having contributed less than 1% to the world's GHG emissions. And we are vulnerable, some islands even at risk of becoming uninhabitable due to sea level rise. On the economic side of things, we are 1%, less than 1% of the global GDP. So, meaning that individually as a seat, a small and developing states, Fiji holds little political weight and other seats in international climate negotiations and other processes that has enabled us, to survive this far. However, opportunities for synergies have been created already, and thanks to the multilateral system that recognizes this through the Paris Agreement, as you all know, the 1.5 degree above pre-industrial levels long-term temperature goal has been adopted in Paris, in Article 1 and 2. And then we have the newly adopted loss and damage mechanism that was initially deliberated at COP19 in Warsaw, Poland. On ocean matters, we've hosted our Oceans Conference in 2017, working in collaboration with the government of Sweden. So much effort has been put forward to address sustainable SDG 14, or life underwater. We were the president of COP23 and led many multilateral negotiations, galvanizing global efforts to combat adverse effects of climate change and the plight of island states like Fiji. So you can see, colleagues, that the challenges that we do face, but we have come in as a member of the multilateral globe of nations to try and weave together opportunities to respond to these challenges. The Samoa pathway, which is the current mechanism for the sustainable development of small island developing states, revealed a number of opportunities recently under its midterm review, ranging from science, technology, and innovation as essential enablers of sustainable development. And you can see that also include sustainable finance, our access to sustainable finance, including grants, concessional financing, climate and disaster relief finance, to ensure effective and tailored finance solutions to regional international cooperation in the education system. We have to build on these global platforms to create synergies. Why? Because we are small, we are vulnerable, we don't have the capacities like our other bigger developing country members who, in terms of absorption capacities, are able to turn around big projects that enable them to utilize and address effective, sustainable solutions. So with this, I entirely agree with the UN Secretary General that cost corrections need to be undertaken through these synergistic actions. Next page, please. Our current global trajectories are evident, are clear. The climate change goals, the environment goals, the sustainable development goals, 17 of them. But the question is, how can we create these synergies? And I'm glad that we've seen a report being presented, because financing gap is fast rising, as we saw in Sharm el-Sheikh in COP27, and we are racing against time. And creating, implementing synergies may be the only savior for us to go forward. Next page, please. So for Fiji, how to ensure synergies are created? Our shared goals to transition the Fijian economy to low carbon and net zero by 2050. This is the commitment and financing gap of Fijian dollars or US dollars 4.3 billion over 10 years, based on our Fiji Climate Vulnerability Assessment Report. So there's the gap, as I already said. Expanding durable and sustainable partnerships, which is the objective of the Samoa pathway. I'm talking about emphasizing durable and sustainable so that the goals are achieved. The role of international cooperation and development assistance remains pivotal in these objectives in accordance with the Paris Agreement Article 2 and the 2030 strategies. So you can see that synergies can be created. These are some of the issues that we found that are very important for us. Renewed climate finance partnership is needed. Accessing loss and damage trust fund is important for us. Effective NDC financing strategies. Policy coherence, we've heard from Heidi, across government to reduce cost of financing, invest in the cost of coordination, efforts, and specialized activities, particularly from the financing side. And creation of statutory governance capacities. This is particularly for smaller countries like us, to address the weak, slow implementations of projects and programs, thus creating synergies. And some market-based instruments, as you all know, blue, green bonds, and also to learn from our partners. Fiji also, our government is very strong in terms of advocating for the adoption of SDGs, because we see it as it provides us a guiding framework for development and planning. It also pivotal for building resilience when taking into account our vulnerability to natural disasters, climate change, and the recent global challenges such as the pandemic and geopolitical tensions. So we see that the SDGs, with its synergies, provide that response for us. Next page, please. Okay, in terms of our economy-wide empowerment, I entirely agree with the UN Secretary General that cost corrections is needed. We need to advocate synergies across all sectors, economy-wide, to commit to net zero, promoting healthy oceans and environment as our shared goals. There are some areas that all sectors like the banking institutions, the financing institutions, the investors, the partners, that needs to build durable and genuine partnerships. Only that we see that Fiji can be able, to achieve our synergistic efforts. And on a final note, we also wish to announce that we are co-sponsoring the UNEA resolution, and Fiji is one of the earlier providing earlier indication after our meeting in Nairobi last year that we will be co-sponsoring this resolution, because we know its value in promoting sustainable development for Fiji and the smaller developing states. Eric, I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, His Excellency Amina. This is very helpful, and we're really appreciative of Fiji's willingness to back this resolution. At the same time, I want to underline some common themes that seem to be reoccurring. This is the emphasis on contextualization of the synergies argument in the Fiji case. I think this is very important. Also, how synergies can help reduce constraints on capacity, I think, is also very important. And this word policy coherence keeps on popping up. So these 3 C's, I think, context, capacity, and coherence are some of the key themes that keep on emerging. And I really appreciate you, bringing our attention to those ideas. It'll be interesting to learn a little bit more about how the synergies argument is playing out in other contexts. And in that connection, I'd like to now move the virtual podium over to our colleague, Dr. Kesini Unapunmonk from Thailand. Dr. Kesini is the head of the Transboundary Air Pollution Subdivision and the Air Quality and Noise Management Division at the Pollution Control Department in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Thailand. And Dr. Kesini, I think, will talk a little bit more about how Thailand is working on synergies, especially between climate change and air pollution. With that introduction, Dr. Kesini, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ulrich, and thank you again for the opportunity of inviting me to join this panel. So I would like to share a little bit of experience from Pollution Control Department in Thailand. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yes, thank you. So I will try to cover all the 3 contents as written here, the key opportunity and challenge for promoting synergy, developing robust planning and reporting frameworks. And also I will try to identify the challenge, good practice, and lesson learned that Thailand have learned according to the linkage between climate change and air pollution. Next slide, please. So I think all of you already know that there are linkage between pollution, climate change, and that all are because of natural resources and human consumption. So I will just go to the next slide, please. So this is just to point out that in the past, even in Thailand, we are dealing with the environmental problem in terms of a conventional approach. So we only focus on the transportation, industrial point sort, and also the area sort. But especially when we come back and look at our country as a nature, so we find out that the source of biggest pollution in Thailand, especially because we are the agricultural based country. So we would like to focus more on the open burning from forest fire and also agricultural open burning. So the concept of looking at air pollution has been slightly different from the past years. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Next, please. So in terms of the linkage between greenhouse gases and air pollution, I have to admit that in the past, Thailand only focused on the air pollution, the criteria air pollutants. We not really pay much attention on the short-lived climate pollutants or the climate change pollutants such as black carbon or even tropospheric ozone. But I think the focus from us now will be a little bit different from now. So we are trying to see the linkage between air pollution and greenhouse gas emission. Next, please. So this is just to present to you that Thailand has joined the Climate and Clean Air Coalition in 2019. And since then, we have undertaken some activity that try to identify the linkage between the climate change and air pollution. For example, we have developed the emission inventory for inland water transport in 2020. And also we have published the report called Simultaneously Achieving Climate Change and Air Quality Goals in Thailand. This one published in May 2023 and is already available on the website of SEI and IGES. So next slide, please. So what we have learned from our study with CCAC, I think the most important is that it's come to realize it's kind of confirm to our observation that if we would like to focus, for example, PM2.5 or particulate matter emission, we would have to look for the agricultural residual burning, which is the largest source of PM in Thailand. And this is also has been identified by the CCAC report. Next, please. And in the next slide, which is coming very shortly, this is also show the recommendation of 19 mitigation measures. It says that if we would like to reduce both the air pollutions and also short-lived climate pollutants and greenhouse gas emission, we should focus on at least these 19 mitigations. And some of the mitigation already has been taken by Thailand government. For example, the implementation of Euro 5 emission standard, which is implemented the beginning of this year, and also forest fire control, which is the measure number 9, which we very much focus on this year. Next slide, please. To confirm with the file out from the CCAC, next slide, please. Yes. So to confirm with the file out from CCAC report, we come back and look at our country natures. So we have studied, we have observed the burn areas in different parts of Thailand. This is the graph present from 1st of January until 30th of May in 2023. And this is actually, we call the particulate matters crisis, the period of we having high concentration of particulate matter in Thailand. And it has been identified that most of the part, the agricultural area of burn area has been detected in the agricultural area. So that is also confirmed to our next activity. And next slide, please. The next slide, I would like to introduce you to the Thailand PM2.5 mitigation measures that have been implemented for this year, especially 2024. In the part of our air quality mitigation measure plan only focus on the concentration of air pollution. For example, we would like to reduce the concentration of PM2.5, then the target in that mitigation measure plan will set like, we would like to reduce the number of days that PM2.5 exceeds our standard, or we would like to reduce the concentration of PM2.5 level in the country. But this year, with the different perspective, we have entirely shift our mind, and then we set the target for this year is we would like to focus on the burn scar or burn area. And the target is to reduce the number of hotspots on the forest fire reduction. And we also found that without the money, without the budget, we cannot actually take any measure seriously. So one of the measures that we really focus on this year, we are going to reform the budget allocation system. So the budget should be allocated to the organization that have obligation to control the emission flows. And also in terms of transboundary air pollution, Thailand has been very active in terms of the transboundary air pollution plan. So I will also show you in the next slide, please. The next slide is just to be more focused on the main target area of the Thailand PM2.5 mitigation measures in this year. We are aiming to reduce the burn area for about 50% for both in the forest area and agricultural area, because it has already been identified from our observation that the burn areas is have frequently happen into the forest and agricultural areas. And we have also set our kind of the provincial half or the regional part. So for example, in 17 provinces in northern part of Thailand is the area that we have faced more serious PM2.5 problems during dry season. And in Bangkok metropolitan region, we actually facing the air quality problems for urban area or for community. So the measure that we implement into different part of Thailand will be different. Next, please. Let's take the example of forest fire management. This year, we are going to revise set of regulation for forestry. In the past, anything that happened in the forest area could not be taken off because this was belong to the forest. So no human activity are allowed in the forest. But this year, because we have observed that there's still a lot of fields or biomass field in the forest, so we're going to revise some of the regulation. Some of the biomass or dry leaf could be taken off and maybe put into the biomass power plant, for example, to reduce the number of fuels that are available in the forest. And in terms of open burning in agricultural area, we are going to introduce what we call good agricultural practice for PM2.5 plus. That is will apply for the agricultural products, especially for corn, for example. If the farmer are growing corns and they would like to sell that corn, they have to be certified somehow that the area before and after harvesting has no burn or burn zero. So we will set the criteria of this. We call it in short as the GAP PM2.5 free. And the other important thing is this year, I think you guys may have heard already, Thailand is introducing the first ever Clean Air Act in Thailand. Next, please. The next slide, please. The next slide, this is show our air quality data center. And this is how we report our PM2.5 or air quality situation to public. We have set the monitoring air quality data report system, and we also report the forecast for like 7 days in advance. And next, please. Next will be about the identifier of the transboundary haze, especially in Mekong sub-region, because Thailand is one of the country in Mekong sub-region. So in the past, in 2020, we have observed the increasing trend of hotspot in most of the countries in our Mekong sub-regions. Next, please. So in terms of action to reduce transboundary haze or hotspot in the Mekong sub-region, there's many action happen, and we call it under the ASEAN Cooperation Plan of Transboundary Pollution or ASEAN Haze, ASEAN Regional Haze Action Plan. And next slide, please. So this event actually we are introducing the second roadmap for ASEAN cooperation on transboundary gas pollution control with means of implementation. And this is the second roadmap because the first one has already ended in 2023. So the event to launch the second roadmap will happen
Dr.
tomorrow.
Kethany, I'm going to ask you to accelerate your progress a little bit, just because we're running short on time. So maybe if you could finish up with maybe the last 2 or 3 slides, that would be very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I just want to point out that the launch event of the second roadmap is actually will happen tomorrow in Indonesia. So a lot of country will go to Indonesia for the events. And next slide, please. I think I can go to the last, yes, next one, please. So this is just the summary of this one. Just go back to the achievement. Go back to the achievement, please. So I just want to say that of all the mitigation measure that I have presented earlier, so this is the example of some achievement that Thailand has done for air quality management in 2023. For example, in 28th of November last year, the cabinet just approved the Clean Air Act in principle, and we are working on the detail of the Clean Air Act. So the rest of the slide you guys can just enjoy. I just put some challenge that Thailand are working on to deal with the air quality management. For example, the PM2.5, the volatile organic compounds, PM10s, and that is will be the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kithani. This was really helpful to understand how Thailand is looking at one angle on synergies, especially between climate change and air pollution, and some of the practical applications that we see moving forward, both within the new Clean Air Act that's coming out shortly, as well as at the regional and sub-regional level. And I mean, I think this also gives us a nice transition to our colleague from the Asian Development Bank. This is Ms. Karma Yangzom. She is a principal environment specialist, and she is also leading a Blue Skies program. So she'll be also talking a lot about the linkages between air pollution and climate change in the context of this program. With that, I'd like to turn the virtual podium over to Karma. Karma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to Government of Japan and IGIS for inviting ADB to participate in this event. So I will be talking about how we are working on promoting co-benefits of together with addressing air pollution under the Asia Clean Blue Skies program of ADB. Next slide, please. So this is just to give a very quick background on the overarching framework of the Clean Blue Skies program, where we have organized the outputs into 3. The first one looking at the upstream and high-level strategic policies plans. The second output is focused on capacity building, raising awareness, and also helping government with improving enforcement of air quality regulations. And the third output is really where we are looking at bringing in, actual clean air solutions through investment projects. And we have organized it around different sectors, focusing on energy and industries, transport sector, indoor pollution, and also reducing open burning, which is a very important topic, which we heard a lot about from our previous speaker. And then, of course, throughout this delivering the activities under the 3 outputs, partnerships will be very, very important as we move forward in implementing this program. Next slide, please. So looking at what we are trying to achieve in the Clean Blue Skies program, and I kind of went beyond not just the climate change SDG, not just SDG 13, but I looked at all other SDGs, and I think there are many SDGs that actually, improving air quality can contribute to. And of course, very special and strong linkages with the good health and well-being SDG 3. And ADB is doing a lot of work in the energy sector, in accelerating renewable energy. So SDG 7 also very strong ties in the work that we are doing. Another one is on industry innovation and infrastructure, where, trying to help introduce new and cleaner technology. So I think that is also a quite strong link. Sustainable cities. This is another, we have a big program that is focused on improving the livability in cities. And then climate action, of course, this is another big one, as we heard before, about the strong linkages between reducing greenhouse gases and air pollution, and then partnerships. So I'm just pointing out the SDGs, which I feel have like stronger links. It's linked with all the SDGs that are shown on the slide, but stronger links with the few that I've pointed out. So in this context, if we can please move on to the next slide, please. I just wanted to give 3 examples of what we have done so far under the Clean Blue Skies program. This program is quite new. We just launched it in September of 2022. So it's been just about over a year since we started implementing it. And we took some time to, figure out as to exactly what we could do under the program. And I just wanted to present a few examples of what we have done so far. So this is for the NDC of the Pakistan government. We supported the government with carrying out an analytical study on how best to integrate air quality into their NDC. So you see the report on the left. This was a study which we supported the government to carry out, and it looked at the existing situation in Pakistan, and then also looked at existing good practices in other countries, and on how other countries have tried to bring in air pollution reduction as part of the climate mitigation targets. And there's also some guidance provided by the CCAC. So as a result of that, then there were some recommendations which came out of the analytical study. And as a result, the recommendations were actually integrated into the updated NDCs, which the government of Pakistan submitted in 2021. So I think this is a really good example, and it's things like this which serve as big opportunities for us to try to tackle both climate change and air pollution together. And I think the challenge here is somehow the conversation, or I guess the issue of climate change is so big that very often people kind of overlook the air pollution reduction co-benefits that are generated out of addressing climate mitigation and reducing greenhouse gases. So I think that's a challenge, and we have to keep on reminding, our colleagues and other representatives of stakeholders working in other sectors and ministries that, hey, you just have to, acknowledge that this particular activity, which is going to result in greenhouse gas emission reduction, will actually also result in air pollution reduction. So it's just a matter of acknowledging that and presenting it clearly. So I think this is what we have done in this example. Next slide, please. So this is another example of actually a very small project in Mongolia, where the study is going on at the moment. This is in Harhorin province in Mongolia. And we are supporting the switching of one heat-only boiler. So currently the heat-only boiler is being, the source of the energy is coal-fired. So we are supporting the government to introduce sourcing that energy actually from the medium depth ground source heat pump, which is new for Mongolia, though this is, practiced in many other countries. This kind of technology is available, but that's not the case for Mongolia. So it's new for them. And through one of the sub-projects under the Clean Blue Skies program, we are supporting the government to introduce this new technology and at the same time try to secure grant co-financing for to cover the cost of the technology from the Japan Fund for Joint Crediting Mechanism. So this is an example in terms of, investment projects in what we are trying to do under the Clean Blue Skies program. And of course, this then has linkages with many other SDGs, which I have shown on the slide. Obviously, good health and well-being is a big one with the, reduced pollution, since instead of burning coal, they will be using the ground source heat. And then clean energy, sustainable cities, because it's located in the city, trying to bring in new technology, and of course, also trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this is an example of an investment project. Next slide, please. So this is my last example. It's focusing on partnerships, and I think SDG 17 is looking at partnerships to help to achieve the 16 SDGs. And I wanted to share this example where we organized the Better Air Quality Conference in the ADB headquarters last year. As we all know, this is a Clean Air Asia-led event. So ADB and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, we partnered with Clean Air Asia in putting this conference together. And I thought it was a great example of partnership. And within that, we had many other active participants. We had a very good representation from Ministry of Environment, Japan. We also had IGIS play an active role in the conference and many other partners. And I think through efforts like this, we were able to bring together many experts and government delegates and also technology providers. We had an exhibition area as part of the conference where a lot of innovative new technology was showcased. And as a result of the conference, we were able to, come up with a list of about 66 project ideas, so that trying to help to accelerate the actions on ground. So I think this was a good example of promoting partnerships. And I think that's my last slide. So that's my last slide. And I would just like to end my presentation by saying that I think this angle of co-benefits is really important, particularly in the context of air pollution, because even though it's such an urgent issue, which we can visually see and feel, particularly when there are all these haze issues, somehow I feel that it still does not get the attention that it deserves. But if we are able to highlight the other co-benefits, the other benefits that are generated from addressing air pollution, it could help to elevate, the importance of air pollution. And going forward, these are just 3 examples that I give. Going forward under the Clean Blue Skies program, we would like to, continue scaling up our efforts and doing similar things. Thank you, Eric. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Karma, for highlighting that this co-benefits and synergies argument really increases the visibility of some of these actions and efforts. I think this is really important for climate change, air pollution, health, and the SDGs more generally. And I think now we're going to take one more look at how this synergies argument and rationale is applied at the local context within Japan. And in that connection, I'd like to introduce Mr. Kenji Tsurumi. He is the Deputy Section Manager at the Kawasaki Environmental Research Institute, and he'll be speaking about synergies between green space and heat stroke with particular applications in Kawasaki. So over to you, Tsurumi-san.
Thank you very much. I'm from Kawasaki Environmental Research Institute. My name is Tsurumi. And Kawasaki City is adjacent to Tokyo with a population of 1.5 million. It is a large city. And as one of the examples, heat mitigation effect and prevention of heat stroke by the shade of roadside trees. This is what I would like to talk about. Next slide, please. One of the key research projects that the Kawasaki Environmental Research Institute is focusing on is a research study that will lead to the prevention of heat stroke, given the increasing trends in heat stroke victims in recent years as a result of rising temperatures. This year, as a step forward from the perspective of nature-based solutions, we will be conducting a research study on the heat reduction effect of roadside trees and shades. The results show that roadside trees are effective in reducing heat for pedestrians on the street and thus preventing heat stroke. From this, we can say that greenery is effective not only for mitigation measures in relation to climate change, but also for adaptation. Next slide, please. This slide shows one example of our research and studies on heat stroke prevention and shows the trends in heat stroke emergency transport and the number of extremely hot days. Extremely hot days are defined in Japan as days when the maximum temperature exceeds 35 degrees centigrade. Recently, due to climate change, temperature in Kawasaki City has been rising. As a result, the number of extremely hot days and the number of heat stroke emergency transport has also been rising. Next slide, please. This slide shows during the 5 years from 2018 through 2022, the number of people transported and the proportion of elderly by location of heat stroke. In Kawasaki, the most are at home, followed by roads. In either case, 60% of people transported are the elderly, aged 65 years and above. Similar trends are seen throughout the country. It is especially important to take measures to prevent heat stroke among the elderly who are vulnerable to heat stroke. Next slide, please. This slide shows the relationship between the highest daytime temperatures and the average daily number of people transported due to heat stroke in the graph. When the maximum temperature exceeds 30 degrees centigrade, the risk of heat stroke rises dramatically. From the viewpoint of heat stroke risk, temperature differences of 1 to 2 degrees cannot be ignored. Next slide, please. This slide shows an experiment of how much heat can be reduced by using parasols or wearing hats outside in sunny weather during the summer. By looking at the infrared thermography camera's body surface temperature after staying in the sun for 10 minutes, the left photo of the monitor using parasol and the center wearing a hat temperature at the top of the head was 80% lower than the right photo with no parasol nor hat. Showing that the 8% lower is showing that the use of parasols and hats are effective in preventing heat stroke. Next slide. This slide shows the overview of our research on the effect of roadside trees on heat reduction. The objective is to verify the heat reduction effect of roadside trees by walking on sidewalks in the shade and in the sunlight. For 2 days in August, during the day when outside temperature exceeded 30 degrees and was sunny, there were 3 cases walking 20 minutes each. Case 1 was walk under the shade. Case 2 was walk in the sunlight. Case 3 was walk in the sunlight with parasol. We measured the heat environmental data and amount of perspiration during their walk. WBGT refers to the heat index and is calculated based on 3 sets of data, which is temperature, humidity, and radiant heat. As it has high correlation with heat stroke, we use it as a guideline to prevent heat stroke. For example, when WBGT exceeds 31 degrees, it is deemed as dangerous and schools in principle stop students from exercising. Please. So this is the heat environmental data of WBGT. It is used for walking approximately 1.5 meter above ground. And perspiration data, any other data, wearable perspiration sensor is attached. So this is measured every 0.1 second while walking. And next slide, please. And this shows in each of the cases, the monitor's walking is shown. And next slide. Now this shows for each of the cases on the pedestrian road, WBGT, and also monitoring perspiration measurement data comparison. Left on top the round plot graph. In each of the cases, for 20 minutes walking, the WBGT average is shown. The orange is case 2, walking in the sunlight, and green is walking in the shade. Between those, 1.8 degree difference is shown, and the light blue, case 3, walking in the sunlight with parasol. So compared to walking in the sunlight, the temperature is 1.0 degree lower. And left-hand bottom graph, for each of the cases, and for 20-minute walk, the monitor perspiration data is shown. The orange is walking in the sunlight, and green is walking in the shade. So you see that walking in the shade, 60% perspiration has been reduced. And the perspiration for walking in the sunlight with parasol is 17% lower than walking in the sun. So we can say that walking in the shade compared to walking in the sunlight with parasol, the WBGT and perspiration is lower. And the main reason for that is, as you can see in the illustration below. So in the shade, from number 2, number 3, so the reflective heat from the road and radiant heat can be reduced. Next slide, please. And this shows using the infrared thermography camera. This is a comparison of body surface temperature immediately after walking cases 1 through 3. So 1 walking under shades, the temperature is low, and case 2 in the sunlight in the there's high surface temperature on top of the head and lower body, and case 3 in sunlight with parasol, the surface temperature is higher in the lower body. So from this, green shade has higher heat reduction effect than parasol, we can say. Next slide, please. And this is based on the result of the research, further actions and challenges. So in our research institute, we have been looking at, as you can see here, with these 3 habits, let us prevent heat stroke. We have utilized this leaflet. And from this research, we have found that shade is more effective than parasol. So greenery is extremely important for adaptation measures in terms of climate change. And therefore, walking in the shade can lead to prevention of heat stroke. And this is what we would like to communicate to the citizens living in our city. And one of the challenges based on this is that in the Japanese roads, it's very narrow, so it's very difficult to secure space to plant trees. So the current trees, from the perspective of nature-based solutions, how these can be effectively utilized is extremely important. And lastly, now this time we looked at roadside trees, but there's greenery with much nature. So the present greenery needs to be preserved. So from the nature-based solutions perspective, we need to come up with similar solutions. That is all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tsurumi-san. This is really helpful for understanding the context-appropriate application of the synergies argument. And I really appreciate all the work that Kerry and your colleagues are doing to make this practical in the Japanese context. I think we've had a really nice display of how synergies are moving forward. And now I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Matthew Hengesbaugh, to give us some question and answer and introduce the closing remarks. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's my real pleasure to be here to facilitate what seems to be quite a short Q&A session. My name is Matthew Hengesbaugh, and I'm a policy researcher with the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, working closely with team. I'm going to go check it right now in the Q&A box and see if we have any questions listed. I don't see any, but there was one that was submitted earlier during, I believe it was Karma's presentation from ADB. So there was a question specifically with regard to challenges in terms of financing synergies between climate change and the wider 2030 agenda. We heard a little bit about financing gaps associated with tackling synergies. From ADB's view, how could some of these challenges be effectively resolved? And what is the thinking of ADB about the role of international financial institutions in doing so? Karma, over to you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that is the main question, right? How do we synergize our efforts? So the challenge, as I had mentioned earlier, is that in the air quality work that I'm doing, I see very often that air quality is sort of overlooked. It seems to be the problem which everybody sees and knows about and hears about, but somehow when it comes to taking concrete actions focused on air quality, it seems to not to be given the importance that it deserves. Now, having said that, there are lots of opportunities, and the biggest opportunity that we have is addressing climate change. And I'm sure some of you must have heard that ADB, we have said we are the climate bank of Asia, and we are making a lot of efforts to ensure that each and every investment project that ADB finances has, contributes to either climate adaptation and mitigation or both. So we have that overarching goal, and then within that, we are working on accelerating, introduction of renewable energy. And I'm not sure, some of you must have heard about the energy transition mechanism that ADB is working with a few countries, basically looking at trying to, prepone the closing down of some of the coal-fired power plants and, encourage countries to, invest in solar and wind and other forms of renewable energy. So the energy sector comprises a big part of ADB's portfolio. And I think through this, there is a lot of opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and at the same time reduce air pollution, because I think 95% of the time, the sources of both air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions are the same. And that's what we are trying to do within ADB. And currently, we are trying to figure out what is the best way to keep track of this in ADB investments. We have a good tracking system for tracking projects that contribute to greenhouse gas emission reductions, but it's not so clear when it comes to air pollution reduction. And at the moment, we are trying to, come up with the metrics and basically try to ride on the existing systems, which is paying so much attention to climate change. So we have energy sector, then we also have transport sector, which comprises a huge part of ADB's portfolio. And as we all know, transport sector is a big contributor to air pollution, particularly in the cities. So that's another area where we are trying to support governments and already supporting governments in having like mass transit systems like MRTs, BRTs, and also trying to support the acceleration of electric vehicles in countries. So that's the transport sector angle. And then also with the agriculture sector. So that's another area which also comprises, a substantial part of the portfolio, and trying to look into agricultural practices which result in less methane emissions. And also the issue, what we heard from our speaker from Thailand, the agricultural residue burning. So that is one area, I have to say, where we have not yet invested much. And that's one area where we would really like to expand our efforts on, particularly because of the, seasonal haze that is, we see every winter season. And I think for the case of Southeast Asia, it's even in the upcoming spring season in March, April, where there is this, and I think Bangkok becomes very, very polluted. So that's also another area. And then, of course, the urban development, which we also call urban sector, which is a mix of, using clean energy, clean transport, and having more green areas, as we heard from a Japanese speaker. So the urban sector is also a big part of our portfolio. And what we are trying to do is to look at all these different sectors and try to come up with some indicators or pointers which I guess, help to showcase the air quality benefits of the investments that we are making. Yeah, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karma. I think that's a most illuminating answer, and we really appreciate you putting this in context of different multi-sectoral actions that can be undertaken, especially to address not only climate change and synergies, of course, with the full Agenda 2030 agenda, but also in terms of particularly the point, climate change and air pollution. And that really sums up well what a number of the other speakers have raised today. So thank you so much for that. I think we're now winding down in the amount of time we have, but it's been a most fruitful discussion we've had today. We're going to close now with some remarks from Ms. Armida Sashia Aris Jabana, Secretary General, of course, of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And following those short closing remarks, we would urge you to please fill out an online survey about some feedback for today's event. We certainly appreciate you giving us your comments and inputs about how we could further scale up discussions like these around synergies and climate change across the region. So thank you very much, and we'll now move over to closing remarks from Ms. Armida. Yeah, thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution is no more acute than in the Asia-Pacific region and is directly linked to SDGs such as Goal 13 on climate action, Goal 3 on enhancing health and well-being, Goal 6 on clean water and sanitation, Goal 7 on expanding affordable and clean energy, as well as Goal 11 on building sustainable cities and communities. Many countries and communities most vulnerable to climate change are in our region. Indeed, our least developed countries and small island developing states are facing the greatest risk, struggling not only with extreme weather events, but a critical loss of biodiversity, water scarcity, and existential threats from rising sea levels. Many of our cities are suffocating under unsafe levels of air pollution, threatening the health, lives, and livelihoods of our populations. The proliferation of plastic pollution in waterways, coastlines, and oceans has diminished our region's beauty and threatens freshwater and marine life. We know that the interconnected nature of SDGs presents great opportunities for synergies, especially across the environment-related goals. And while we face challenges, our region is also known for its innovations and continues to create solutions that generate co-benefits and synergies. We have technologies and innovations for accelerating low-carbon transition. However, this requires ambitious and enabling policies to make the transitions a reality. Integrated approaches to three main sectors, energy, transport, and industry, will not only generate necessary reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, but will make communities more efficient, cleaner, and greener, advancing progress against the multiple SDGs. Threats facing our region, climate, air pollution, waste, and biodiversity loss come from the way we are developing. We know that unmanaged growth leads to sprawl, while a lack of well-planned infrastructure investments contributes to the very environmental challenges we face. Generating synergies naturally will come from more effective and integrated approaches to managing growth, including for future energy, transport, waste, and industry needs. Given the continued challenges we face in achieving the targets of the SDGs, it is especially important that your discussion today, highlighting these synergies, be brought forward, not only at the forum, but in the development policies at the national and local levels. We look forward to continuing to work with you to accelerate progress and stand ready to support countries to raise ambition levels across our region. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to close off the webinar, but please do respond to the survey that will be distributed over Zoom. Thank you very much, and we do appreciate your time.